Okay, so let's dive into something a little bit different today.
Okay.
You're probably hearing a lot about Trump's return to the presidency,
Right.
but we're going hyper-specific today for you in this deep dive.
Okay.
We're talking name changes,
Okay.
but not just any name change.
Right.
We're talking about Trump signing these executive orders to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America and changing Denali back to Mount McKinley.
Yes, renaming landmarks is actually more common than you might think.
Really?
Throughout history, often tied to shifts in power,
Yeah.
or cultural reevaluations.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, oh, okay, interesting, but how does this affect me?
Right.
Well, get this. It could impact everything from maps and textbooks
Right.
to tourism
Yeah.
and even potentially your local weather report.
It's true. These changes, while symbolic, do have the potential to ripple through our everyday lives
Globally.
in unexpected ways.
Yeah, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Okay.
First up, what's Trump's reasoning behind all this?
Well, the executive orders cite honoring American greatness.
Okay.
And figures like President McKinley, who Trump seems to view as a kindred spirit, a successful businessman turned politician.
Right. I remember reading about Trump drawing parallels between himself and McKinley,
Yeah.
even calling him a very successful businessman at a rally.
That's right. And this connection seems to be a key factor
Yeah.
in the decision to revert Denali back to Mount McKinley.
And that's where it gets really fascinating, right?
Right.
Because Denali already went through a name change back in 2015.
Yes.
When Obama officially restored its original Koyukon Athabascan name, now Trump's reversing that decision.
The Denali case is particularly interesting because it touches on the larger debate
Yeah.
over honoring indigenous names and legacies. It's
Yeah.
a microcosm of a much broader conversation
Right.
about representation and whose stories get told.
It's like this mountain is caught in a tug of war
And
between different versions of history and identity.
exactly. And it's important to remember that for the Koyukon people,
Yeah.
Denali is more than just a mountain. It's deeply intertwined with their culture,
Sure.
their spirituality, and their sense of place.
And on the flip side, we have the Gulf of America.
Mhm.
I mean, can you imagine trying to explain that to someone from, say, Mexico?
It's certainly a bold move and one that raises questions about international recognition
Right.
and diplomacy. Will other countries adopt this new name?
Yeah, good question. It seems like creating a Gulf of America might actually cause more division than unity,
Yeah,
especially considering it's a shared space with other countries.
absolutely. It could lead to confusion, pushback, and even diplomatic tensions.
And beyond the international implications, what about the everyday folks who live and work around the Gulf?
Well, consider the fishermen who rely on accurate nautical charts,
Oh, yeah?
the tourism businesses that have built their brands around the Gulf of Mexico,
Uh-huh.
even the teachers who will now have to explain this change to their students.
Wow. It's like someone suddenly decided to rename Times Square, Trump Plaza.
Right,
Sure, you can change the signs,
right.
but it doesn't change the reality of the place or how people think about it.
You've hit on a crucial point. These name changes might seem symbolic,
Right.
but they have real-world implications. Imagine the confusion for shipping companies
Oh, yeah.
navigating the Gulf of America.
Oh, wow.
Or the costs for businesses
Right.
having to update their branding and marketing materials.
It's not just businesses either.
Yeah.
Think about educators.
Right.
Teachers are going to have to explain to their students why the Gulf they learned about last year
Right.
suddenly has a new name Bitsbooks is. Textbooks will need to be revised, maps updated. It's a logistical headache.
Yeah.
That will impact how information is disseminated
Yeah,
and understood.
precisely. And let's not forget the potential impact on tourism.
Oh, right.
The Gulf of Mexico is a major tourist destination.
Yeah.
Changing its name could create confusion for travelers and potentially impact the economies of coastal communities
Sure.
that rely on tourism dollars.
It seems like these changes are creating this ripple effect,
Yeah.
touching everything from international relations to local economies.
And it all comes back to the power of names. We use them to navigate, to communicate,
Yeah.
to build our sense of place and identity.
Right.
When those names are changed, it can disrupt our understanding of the world around us.
It's like that saying, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Right.
But would the Gulf of America really feel the same?
Well,
Would Denali still hold the same significance for the people of Alaska?
That's a really important question. It gets at the heart of the emotional and cultural impact of these name changes. For some, they might evoke a sense of national pride, a celebration of American history, but for others, they might represent an erasure of indigenous culture or a disregard for the history of the region.
And let's not forget the people who are just plain confused, like, wait, didn't we already settle this?
Right.
It's like we're experiencing collective geographical whiplash.
And that whiplash can fuel division and resentment. When you change a name that's deeply connected to people's sense of identity or history, it can feel like an attack on their values and beliefs.
It's almost like a microcosm of the larger political and cultural divides in our country.
Yeah.
We can't even agree on what to call a mountain.
Right.
Or a body of water.
It highlights the importance of dialogue and understanding.
Yeah.
These name changes have sparked important conversations about representation history and the power of language.
So we've talked about the potential economic impact, the logistical headaches, the cultural and emotional implications.
Yeah.
But what about the legal side of things?
Right.
Are these name changes even well legal?
That's where it gets interesting. While the president does have the authority to rename certain landmarks, through executive orders, that authority isn't unlimited.
Okay, so there might be some legal hurdles to clear.
Right.
Could we see lawsuits, court battles, appeals, the whole shebang?
It's certainly a possibility. There's already been pushback from Alaskan lawmakers and indigenous groups.
Right.
Regarding the Denali name change, they argue that it disrespects the cultural heritage of the region and ignores the historical significance of the name Denali.
And on the international front, it's unlikely that other countries will simply adopt Gulf of America without question.
Yeah.
Imagine the maps where they have two names, one in English, one in Spanish. It's a recipe for confusion on a global scale.
It raises questions about how these changes will be reflected internationally.
Yeah.
Will international organizations adopt the new names?
Right.
Will there be diplomatic discussions? It all adds another layer of complexity to this situation.
So if I'm a fisherman in the Gulf,
Right.
a teacher in Alaska, or even just someone who likes to look at a map and know what they're looking at, what does this all mean for me?
It means we're likely in for a period of adjustment.
You might see different names on maps and textbooks, on your weather app.
Yeah.
You might have to explain these changes to your students, your customers, your colleagues.
It sounds like we're all going to need a crash course in geography and diplomacy in the coming months.
Perhaps. But what's most important is that we engage in these conversations thoughtfully. And with respect for the diverse perspectives involved.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the political drama.
Right.
But ultimately, these name changes impact real people, real communities, and real identities.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this renaming saga,
Yeah.
let's leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. If you could rename a landmark,
Okay.
what would it be and why?
Right.
What story would your choice tell?
Names hold power. They shape how we see the world, our history, and ourselves. Pay attention to the stories behind the names, and you'll understand those forces better. Yeah, it really makes you realize how much we take names for granted. Like, they seem so simple, but they carry so much weight, practically and emotional.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the names themselves, but the process of renaming.
Right.
Who gets to decide what values and priorities are being reflected?
Yeah.
These are all questions we need to grapple with as a society.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener.
Okay.
If these name changes do go through,
Right.
how might you encounter them in your daily life?
Well, think about the last time you used Google Maps or looked up directions.
Right.
Those maps might need to be updated.
Yeah.
The same goes for textbooks, encyclopedias, travel guides.
Wow.
Even something as simple as your local weather report could be affected.
And it's not just about encountering the new names.
Right.
It's about navigating the confusion, the potential for misinformation, and even the emotional reactions these changes might trigger.
Imagine you're planning a vacation to the Gulf. You've been dreaming of swimming in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
When you start booking flights and hotels, everything refers to the Gulf of America. It might seem like a small thing, but it could change your perception of the trip. Right. Even if the beaches and the water are exactly the same.
That's such a good point. It highlights how these changes can impact our personal experiences.
Right.
And even our memories. Think about kids learning geography today.
Yeah.
Will they grow up thinking it's always been the Gulf of America? Will they even know the history behind the original name?
It really underscores the power of names to shape our understanding of the world
Yeah.
and even influence how future generations perceive history.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one key takeaway you want to leave our listener with today?
Pay attention to the names around you. Don't take them for granted. Dig into their history, understand their significance, and be aware of the forces at play when those names are changed. Because ultimately, names are more than just labels. They're reflections of our values, our identities, and our shared history.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder that very idea. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.